So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware of the fact that I'm the last speaker of today, and somebody of you might already be a little bit sleepy, but I promise I will give my best not to make you sleep and to keep my lecture as short as possible in order to get anybody of us to the reception afterwards. So I know we are a little bit in a hurry, but I think my lecture might give you some interesting aspects on what is going on now within the archives. And another thing I'd like to say at the beginning of my lecture, I'm absolutely and deeply delighted of being here, of having the opportunity to speak to us. We already had a workshop today focusing on our Icarus association and also dealing with the topic of my lecture now, dealing with the cooperation of archives. And I would like to thank once more the organizers for the invitation to have this workshop here and now having this lecture here. So thank you very, very much. The title of my presentation might seem a little bit comprehensive, but I don't aim to give you a comprehensive overview about basic principle of archives in the digital era. What I just wanted to do is to draw your attention to some special aspects which we are facing now, and I'd like also to make you a little bit think about those aspects. Allow me some basic considerations. First of all, we already heard from one of the speakers in advance that we now in the digital era also have to think about the readability of our data in 200 years. That's true, of course, but on the other hand, we should also be aware of the fact that we live in something like a digital stone age, that we're just at the beginning of the digital era, and that many things we are facing now is just the beginning. And if you think of the family Flintstone, you see they had a TV, some kind of TV, but the real Flintstones didn't have a TV, and they really had no idea of a TV, and they really had no idea of computers or mobiles or something like that. So I'm deeply convinced of the fact that we will find solutions for keeping our data readable, but that we do not have to find those solutions for the next 200 years now at the moment in the year 2012. That the process of developing long-term preservation processes for the next 200 years is a task not only for us but also for the future generations, and that we can be quite relaxed in dealing with this topic. Another aspect I'd like to bring to you is that archives so far have been compared to libraries. They have a certain kind of difficult situation because all the information stored in physical archives is basically restricted to one place. So if you want to access one charter or a manuscript in an archive, you have to go there, and you have to go there in the opening hours of this archive. So the information stored in physical archives is some kind of restricted. Now with digitizing those informations, this information, the first time in history, archival information becomes free. Archival information becomes free of its physical restriction and now can not only theoretically but also practically be accessed at any time at an any place in the world. And I think this is revolutionary new, especially for archives. Libraries usually hold printed books, and printed books usually have a lot of copies. So this process of the digital era is, especially for archives, in my view, very, very revolutionary. But not only the digital accessibility I'd like to focus on. Okay, now it's nice to access digital objects singularly. It's nice to visit singular websites of singular archives and to go there like into the physical archive and to go in the database of this archive and to access the charter there. That's nice, and that has been 10 years before. But the second revolutionary aspect is the linking of the data. Linking of data is as revolutionary as the digital, as making it digitally accessible as well. Because you have not only the opportunity to create research tools of different kinds, you also have the opportunity to carry out research in a much simpler way than former generations were able to do that. And that opens absolutely new perspectives which we now at the moment are not able to capture. And another basic consideration is, let me say it in this way, I'm also deeply convinced that archives are one very, very important part of the memory of mankind's memory. If we consider what I have said before, if we talk about physical archives, so we have a little problem, and let's be honest, physical archives are something for not very many people. Physical archives are mostly visited by people who know that archives exist, who are familiar with scientific methods, but it's not, archives are nothing for a majority of society, of people. Archives so far have been something for a very, very tiny minority of society due to the physical restriction of storing the information at one place. But by making the archival information accessible digitally on the web, archives, for the first time in history, really can take on their task of being a memory of mankind, a memory of society. Now, all citizens of Poland, of Europe, of the world can access archival information at any time, at any place in the world. And I'm deeply convinced that the digital era will enhance the importance of archives radically. Archival content won't be anymore something for minorities. Archival content will be something for a very big audience, but it will be a long way to achieve that. Let's talk about some consequences of these considerations. Basically, a physical archive can live like a lonesome island somewhere in the sea. It's good to have contacts, it's good to have some exchange of knowledge and some exchange of experiences, but to be honest, it's not so important, and physical archives also can live without that. But in the digital era, times are getting a little bit dangerous for archives thinking like this, and lonesome islands are not the solution for the digital era. And therefore, it's not only necessary for the archives to get closer together, to cooperate, to exchange their knowledge and their experience, they also have to overcome old barriers, especially mental barriers or historical barriers. It doesn't matter where an archive is situated, in which country it is, or which kind of holdings an archive has. All archives around the world face the same challenges at the moment. And therefore, it is important, and it will be much more important, to get rid of those barriers and to find new ways of cooperation and to find new ways of exchanging knowledge and experiences. Another consequence is, if we consider the traditional archive, that the function of a traditional archive is to store, to process, and to provide historical material or archival material. And basically this is something like a one way from the archive to the user. So the archive provides the holdings to the user jots down his notes and leaves the archive with his or her notes, writes some article, and if the archive is lucky, it gets the article at some time back. And the article is stored afterwards somewhat in some shelf in the storage room. But the information the user won out of his research is not connected to the information, to the archival object itself. But now with the new technological possibilities, this one way will step by step be abandoned. And our current users will be our partners of tomorrow. So this means that the digital era will bring a big shift towards to a new partnership between archives and users. I'd like to give you an example from Australia, where the Australian National Library asked the users to help them to process newspaper articles. They digitized 45 million newspaper articles, and they developed an online tool which enabled the users to correct and to comment those articles. So the library was not able and didn't have the resources to do this work itself. And this way, about 30 million rows were corrected by the online community. And what was the experience of the Australian National Library? Just a moment. what I forgot to say is, firstly, they thought, okay, we have to ensure that the users don't abuse the tool and that the users register and that the users are observed very strictly in order to have a strict quality assurance. But the analysis of 18,000 comments of the users brought the following result. There were 114 spams and 71 abusive comments. So 99% of the comments were useful. And this made the Australian National Library to rethink the concept of this tool, and afterwards they opened the tool without registering, and this way they enhanced the number of users taking part in this project, and they also wrote in their article about this project, go ahead, invite user contributions without worrying about spam and abuse. And I think that's very important also if we speak about future relationships between archives and users, to be confident that this relationship will work. So this means one of the major aspects of the future will also be to use alternative partnerships, make use of the power of the crowd. Archivists have a lot of knowledge, but the users have a lot of knowledge too. And linking of those two knowledges will bring absolutely new revolutionary results. But be aware of the fact, any restriction you build into the accessibility of online systems have the consequence that this data won't have the value it really deserves. So only open data enable an added value, because if you have barriers, if you have barriers in accessing some data, it can't be linked to the other data, and so you get rid of the great advantages of the digital era. I'm representing here a network of about 130 institutions from 22 European countries and Canada. It's called Icarus, the International Center for Archival Research. It's an institution I would like to introduce you afterwards a little bit more in detail. But as a preface, I'd like to give you the background of that, what I'm now saying. What I'm now telling you is something out of my team's experiences we had within the last years. And this means you have here again a lot of archives across the world, across Europe. They are connected, and I think it's important to be aware of the fact that all those archives together keep a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of resources, and also of competences. And I think it is important to cross the borders of your own archive and to become aware of the fact that all archives together, or let's talk about the Polish community of archives, all archives together hold an enormous treasure of knowledge, of experience, of resources. And not each singular archive needs to have this treasure alone. If all archives work together and overcome certain barriers, they can be sure to be part of the treasure. This means also that each archive, each scientific institution dealing with archival sciences can be something like a puzzle stone. Something like a puzzle stone of a big, big puzzle. And integrating the puzzle stone not only fills the puzzle, it complements it. This means that if every archive, every institution provides its knowledge, its experience to the others, it is ensured that the puzzle is complete and all the institutions can face and meet the challenges of the digital era much more effectively than alone. One consequence out of this is also that the singular archives and institutions avoid to reinvent the wheel once or twice or more times. So the wheel has to be invented only once. And another consequence out of this mindset is synergy. Synergy means not to host your own digital infrastructures alone. It means that infrastructure can be and must be shared by more institutions. It's much more efficient to carry out the development of digital systems together. It's not so expensive, and also working on those systems is not so exhaustive and time expensive. At the moment, a lot of digital infrastructure for cultural heritage institutions are arising. But there is a basic tendency that on the one hand you have the European infrastructure and on the other hand you have the national infrastructure. So you have the Europeana for digital copies of your objects, you have the Archives Portal Europe, or you also have national archival portals, like here, the Polish system. All those aspects cause a lot of questions. I would like just to give you a short overview of those questions. Of questions which can be faced and which can be dealt with in close cooperation with colleagues from other archives and which need not to be faced alone. This means the web presence of archives generally. This means the online accessibility of archival fonts. This means the development and the integration of standards. This means the digital processing of fonts, This means also publicity and public relations. I think especially this field brings revolutionarily new challenges for archives. If we think of fields like Facebook, Twitter, or other Web 2.0 platforms. This also means the involvement of users as partners, and the organization of financial and human resources, and also the creation of third-party funds. This is another development of the last 10, 20 years, that also public archives are more and more forced to gain other funds than the regular statal funds, to go into international projects, especially European projects. This also means that archives and scientific institutions, or institutions dealing with archival sciences, or institutions which are able to bring a useful contribution to a project, will have to get closer within projects to build networks, and to build networks not just inside a country, to build networks across countries. We have the experience from our Icarus association, which is a non-profit association under Austrian law, but Austrian law doesn't mean much. If you want to found an institution in Europe, you have to found it in some country. Incidentally, it was Austria, and so the association was founded in Austria. But Icarus is an international institution consisting of about 130 members. 90% are archives, 70% are scientific institutes coming from 22 European countries and Canada. And within this association, we try to rise up to the challenges of the digital era. We try to get closer. We try to have something like a platform for European projects. And perhaps the most important thing, we also try to overcome the old borders and barriers within Europe, and to create some consciousness of a common Europe, of our common history and culture on this continent, and especially here in Central Europe. So I think I don't have to tell you something about the old cultural and historical connections between Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland, and Germany, of course. So we have a common history, we have common holdings in our archives, and I think it's really, really important to work together in keeping these archives and also to making them accessible all over Europe, but not all over Europe, all over the world, because I don't know which American city that is, where there is a very big Polish community, so you have a lot of Polish people around the world, and all those Polish people are enabled to access their historical memory wherever they are. So are they in America or are they in Australia? By digitizing your archival stocks, those people, those citizens of your country, or those former citizens of your country, get enabled also to deal with their history of their home country. And I think that's also a very, very important aspect of the digital era. It might be surprising that the financing of Icarus is exclusively by grants and project fundings. There are no membership fees, and therefore any institution which would like to actively take part in our association to think with us together about the challenges of the digital era is warmly invited to join us. But, and with that I would like to finish. As I already told, I started in the Stone Age. I'd like to finish with the Stone Age. It's also important to know that we have opened a very huge building site, the building site of the digital era. And allow me a personal word in that matter. I think it's so exciting building on the fundaments of this digital era. And so I'd like to thank you for your attention. I hope my presentation was not too long. And if you have any questions, I'm at your disposal. Thank you.